Approximately, I'm going to work with about 40 grams of silver. And I have some scrap silver as well as a brand new bullion of silver. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure out 92.5% silver and 7.5% copper to make sterling silver for my ingot. Okay, I'm going to use my Smith little torch with the large tip. This allows me to, it has 5 holes in it, allows me to get very hot flame. I'm also going to put some oil in the slits of the ingot to make the rod. In addition to putting oil in the slits of the ingot, I'm going to use mostly gas in my Smith little torch, a little bit of oxygen to put soot in the slots. This will help the metal to release easier when I go to release the metal out of the ingot. Okay, what I do is I add the old sterling silver first and get that melted, and then what I do is throw a little boric powder in there to help that melt. And then I put in the pure silver, then I add the copper last, and I get this to a nice melting point. Also, I might add that you want to make sure that your ingot mold is warm first, and you saw me earlier heat that up and get that warm, because if it's warm then it won't be such a shock when you pour the molten metal into the ingot. The way I'm going to pour this, I'm going to start at the bottom or the section of the ingot closest to me. I'm going to kind of push away. I'm going to just carefully stay in a straight line and just kind of pour and push at the same time so I can get a nice even pour of metal into the ingot channel. Once the metal cools, then I'm going to release the metal out of the ingot and put it in the pickle acid so it can get cleaned up and all of the scale can be cleaned off. You may need to use a small screwdriver to help pry the metal out of the ingot slot. The pickling solution would clean off all of the fire scale. It also would clean off any of the boric powder residue that might be on the metal. We want nice clean metal for the milling process that comes next. So we're going to use a steel brush to also brush with soapy water to clean up our metal very nice. I wound up with 2 different pieces of rod, and I'm going to run the 2 individually, starting with the largest slot in my rolling mill. And I'm just going to roll these through, and then I'm going to anneal to soften the metal to make it malleable, and then I'm going to repeat this process all the way through until the rod becomes wire. When annealing, I like to turn off the lights like they used to do in the old days of jewelry. They work by candlelight. I like to turn off the lights so I can see just the right temperature the metal gets, and that way I can achieve the optimal softness of the metal without overheating. I personally like to mill my metal through the rolling mill to achieve the type of wire I want, as opposed to buying the metal already made. I like to melt and pour and mill my metal because, first of all, it's cheaper because you can buy the metal from a metal exchange at basically wholesale prices according to the precious metal market. And also you can control the quality of the rod and the size of the rod, and you actually come out with less waste because you don't have to carry in your stock multiple sizes of rod and wire. And if you don't have to carry multiple sizes of rod and wire, that's just going to be very efficient and inexpensive and the best way to go. So the rolling mill winds up paying for itself over time as you create wire and sheets of metal to work with. And here you can see in this overhead shot how I just take the wire down just a little bit at a time each time it passes through. We're going to repeat the process of going through the rolling mill and annealing and cleaning the metal over and over until we achieve a size just larger than the size of the finished link that we're trying to make. So this is going to be a little bit of a period. You have to be patient. You want to take your metal down just a little at a time, but it's worth it because you get the exact size wire or link that you want, which is very, very important because you have the ultimate control. We're going to step down just a little at a time, fractions of a millimeter at a time, as we roll through the wire through, so that we don't have cracks in the metal. And of course, we're going to anneal the metal to soften it periodically. This also helps to prevent cracks and various imperfections to come in your metal. In this view, you can see the various slots that I have in the rolling mill, and how in each slot I'm stepping down just a little bit on my dial at the top of the rolling mill to take it down just gradually. And then once I get to the end of that slot, I go on the next slot and I take that down even just gradually, just a little bit more, until my wire gets thinner and thinner and longer and longer. You can see in this view, I'm in the next slot over to my right, which is a smaller slot. Again, I'm taking the mill down just a little bit at a time. You can see the wires coming out longer and longer and thinner and thinner. And when I get the wire to a certain length, it cannot fit in my pickle pot anymore. So what I do is I roll the wire into a little circle so that it can be annealed easier. And when the wire gets close to the length and the thickness that you want, it's time to start measuring the wire with a caliper, just to make sure that you don't get too thin too soon. And the reason you want the wire just to be larger than the finished size, because we're going to take the wire through a draw plate, because my rolling mill actually makes a diamond shaped wire or a square shaped wire. And what I ultimately want is a nice round wire where the silhouette of the wire is round. So that's going to require me pulling the wire through a round draw plate. And with this round draw plate, for example, if I want to finish with a 1.6 millimeter thickness round wire, then I'm going to probably start somewhere about 2.4 millimeters. And then I'm going to step down on the draw plate as I pull it through and finish at 1.6. Use the mill to take about a 1/2 inch of your wire down, somewhat thin, but not too thin, but thin enough to fit through the first initial holes of your draw plate, so you can get about a 1/2 inch or so through the draw plate, so that you have something to grip onto with your draw pliers. You can also use a file for this to make your wire pointy so it can fit through the holes, so you can get your draw pliers to grip it. You want about a 1/2 inch of that so you can get a nice good grip on the wire and pull it on through, because your wire is being milled down in diameter and it's getting longer in length as you pull it through. And as the holes get successively smaller, the wire will get longer and longer, and of course thinner and thinner. Just like when using the rolling mill, when you use a draw plate, your metal will get work hardened as you successfully pull it through smaller and smaller holes. So you're going to have to anneal your metal to soften it and return it back to the draw plate to take it down even smaller or thinner in diameter. And of course, the draw wire will get longer. Once the wire is annealed and cleaned with soapy water and a steel brush, it's time to roll the wire and make your links. We're going to use the Peppy Tools Jump Ring Maker to make our links for our spindle. We made a spindle by filing down a piece of steel until it was 2 millimeters by 3 millimeters in dimension. And we're going to stick this in the end of our Peppy Tools, bend on a right angle the beginning of the wire into the groove of the Peppy Tools drill bit receiver, and then we're going to simply roll out some links onto a spindle. We're going to use a jeweler saw to cut the links off of the spindle. I basically have a problem getting my links off of my spindle because they're so tight. So I just simply use a jeweler saw and cut the links right on the spindle. It doesn't really bother me that much if the spindle gets a little bit cut by my saw, but I'm very careful and I don't really damage the spindle that much. And then I can always make another spindle if I need to. But I might add that the spindles that come with the Peppy Tools jump ring maker are very nice and smooth and slick. And generally when I make jump rings with those, the jump rings slide right off after I roll out some links. But those are round links. In this case, I wanted links to be kind of oval shape, which is about 2 by 3 millimeter shape. So in this case, with my self-made spindle, the friction just was too great and I could not get the jump rings to slide off. So I simply use a jeweler saw, keeping my saw very flush to the spindle as possible. I just cut off a few links at a time and do it that way, and they come off just as easy this way. Also, what I do is I do keep my saw very flat, and I try to establish a channel in as many of the links as I can, if not all of the links, so that I can make sure that my jump rings come out nice and uniform. So I create with the saw a nice channel or line, including multiple links. And then what I do is I kind of cut the bottom links off and just work toward the end until I have all of the links off of the spindle. In this case, as it turns out, I wound up making 3 different wires. So I don't really want the wires to be too long on a spindle, because then it's hard to get them off and it's harder to cut them. So you want about 1 inch or 2 at the most on your spindle when you go to saw them off. I use some wire snips to snip off the extra on the spindle before I cut as well. Once I get all my links cut and I have them in a tray, what I do is I get my pliers and I put the ends of the links together nice and close and get them ready for soldering. So I want them nice and even, nice and flush, and nice and close. And what I want to do is start off with about 1/5 of the links that I've made, and I'm going to solder the links closed. And when I have the links soldered closed, I'm going to cool them in the water, and then I'm going to add a link on each side of the link that's soldered closed. So I have a total of 3 links now, and then I'm going to solder those links closed. Now I just counted my links and I decided I need to make a few more than the ones that I initially made. So I'm going to do the 1 link close and make a few more 3 links before proceeding to the next step. And we're going to solder the 2 links that we added to the first initial ring that we made, and we're going to have a bunch of 3 link sets here. And of course what we're going to do is get that set up, and we're going to add another jump ring in the center of those 2. Now we're going to take the jump rings that are 3 sets, and we're going to attach a new jump ring in the center of that, making 7 links. So we're making a 7 link chain by adding the 2 soldered 3 link chains together. Once we have a series of these 7 links put together, we're going to solder them, and we're going to repeat the process. We're going to add another jump ring, and we're going to attach the 2 groups of 7s together, to make 15 jump rings altogether, and we're going to solder those. When we're soldering, we're going to use our third hand tweezers, and we're going to grab the jump ring that needs to be soldered with those tweezers, exposing the solder joint. We're going to add a little bit of flux to the joint. And of course, that particular jump ring is clean, so that particular jump ring will take to the solder very nice. And as you can see on the charcoal block, we have little pylons of silver solder. And what we're going to do is we're going to heat those pylons up and make them into a little ball. We're going to heat these little molten balls of silver solder. And we're going to take the pick and we're going to gently poke the molten ball while it's still molten and still soft, and it will stick to the end of the solder pick. And this is called pick soldering. And then what we'll do is we'll heat up the link until it's hot and ready for solder and at solder temperature, and we're going to just simply tap that little ball onto the end of the solder joint, and it will flow right into the solder joint. Once we have the chain assembled, what we're going to do is twist the chain, and we're going to twist the chain by putting one end into a vise and the other one into a hand vise until we start to get a little bit of a spiral pattern forming in the chain. And it's going to kind of give it a little bit of a curved link or a Cuban link type of look. Using a set of flat pliers or parallel pliers, we're going to tweak some of the links that may not have been as uniform as we wanted when we were twisting it, so we can get the desired look throughout the chain that we want. Using the Peppy Tools jump ring maker, we're going to make a round set of jump rings. We don't really need that much, maybe about 4 or 5. And then we're going to cut them down. They should be about 3 millimeters round and a little bit thinner than the actual links. Just aesthetically, it looks better to me. And now we're going to use a set of parallel pliers and some flat pliers to open up the jump ring and attach the chain to the lobster claw. Once we've attached the chain to the lobster claw clasp with the jump ring, we're going to solder the jump ring closed. We're also going to add another 3 millimeter jump ring to the other side of the chain, and that's going to be the receiver to the lobster clasp. And we're going to solder that jump ring closed as well. Here is a good illustration of how I solder a jump ring, where I have the video slowed down to a normal speed. You can see me add the flux and then go around and around with the flame until I get the heat evenly dispersed throughout the jump ring. Once I pick up a pylon of solder on the edge of my pick, and then I get the metal up to heat, and then I simply tap that pylon of solder right into the solder joint, and it flows right in. Please like and subscribe to this video. Also give me a comment on what you'd like to see in future videos. Also, if you comment on how I can improve my videos, that would be very much appreciated. In addition, hit the little bell button so you'll be notified as to when future videos will show up. And of course, share the video. All right, thank you very much.